February 2021. A warehouse on the outskirts of Frankfurt hums under a cold fluorescent light. Servers whine like trapped insects. Rows upon rows of black towers blinking in eerie synchronization. Outside, a dozen unmarked vans idle in the mist. Doors open. Tactical boots hit wet asphalt. Shadows fan out. Go, go, go. Within seconds, the silence fractures steel, doors slam, concrete shudders, and the blue-white flash of a breaching charge lights up the night. The agents pour in. Shouts in German, English, Russian echo through the hollow corridors. Laptops snap shut, screens flicker and die. A figure runs not far, cornered against a metal rack stacked with hard drives. One wrong move, and years of empire vanish into smoke. Hydra, dark market, empire market. Names whispered in encrypted chat rooms and law enforcement briefings alike. The marketplaces where drugs, weapons, and stolen identities traded hands faster than law could keep up. Their sellers moved in shadows. Their profits in crypto were invisible. Until tonight, on one monitor still running, an anonymous handle flashes online. Hydra admin, disconnecting all nodes. Then black, total blackout. By morning, hundreds of millions in cryptocurrency are frozen. The biggest darknet markets in the world gone overnight, vanished, as if swallowed by the void they once ruled. But how do you destroy an empire built on anonymity? And in a world where money, power, and identity no longer need faces, did it truly vanish, or simply move deeper underground? The story of Hydra and its fallen kin doesn't begin with explosions or arrests. It begins with loneliness, the quiet hum of servers in forgotten basements, the tapping of keys in rooms with curtains drawn tight. In the late 2000s, before Bitcoin was a household word, a different revolution was brewing. It wasn't about money or markets, not at first. It was about privacy. About the dream that on the internet, you could be free, unseen, unjudged, untraceable. That dream would birth a monster. In 2011, a marketplace called Silk Road appeared on the Tor network, a hidden layer of the internet, where IP addresses dissolved into encryption fog. It promised a utopia for libertarians and outlaws alike, a place without censorship, where anything could be bought or sold. Its creator, Ross Ulbricht, known only as Dread Pirate Roberts, wasn't selling drugs himself. He sold trust. He built a system where buyers and sellers could meet anonymously, protected by Bitcoin and reputation scores. For a time, it worked until the FBI kicked down his door in a San Francisco library in 2013. Ulbricht's empire fell, but the seed had already scattered. The dark web had tasted profit. By 2015, Russian-speaking markets like Hydra began to rise. Unlike their predecessors, they were disciplined, almost militaristic. They didn't cater to everyone, only vetted vendors. Their logistics were precise. Customers bought cocaine or fake passports online, paid in Bitcoin, and received GPS coordinates to retrieve the goods from hidden dead drops, in parks, or behind bus stops. No human contact, no witnesses, no trails. Hydra became more than a market. It was a digital state, complete with rules, internal security, arbitration courts, even money laundering services for criminal organizations. If you were inside Hydra, you weren't just a user, you were part of a system that believed itself untouchable. At its peak, Hydra handled more Bitcoin transactions than some legitimate exchanges. Its operators enforced strict discipline. Vendors had to maintain perfect delivery rates. Disputes were resolved through Hydra's admin judges. They took commissions, laundered funds through mixing services, and expanded into fraud tools and hacking software. Everything the surface web forbade, Hydra industrialized. In Western Europe, another empire grew, dark market, operating under a similar model, connecting thousands of buyers across continents. Their servers were hidden in multiple countries, bouncing through encrypted layers like a digital shell game. Each time police seized a node, 3 more appeared elsewhere. To law enforcement, it was like chasing smoke. But what no one knew was that these empires, Hydra, dark market, empire market, were beginning to rot from within. Compromised admins, broken OPSEC, betrayal, greed. The same anonymity that had built them would soon devour them. Because when every face is hidden behind a screen name, trust isn't loyalty, it's illusion. And in the winter of 2020, that illusion started to crack. It started with silence, not the kind born of peace, but the quiet that precedes a storm. In early 2020, deep inside Europol's cybercrime center in The Hague, a small task force stared at a wall of digital maps. Dots pulsed red across Europe, Russia, and the EU, each representing an IP node connected to a darknet market. The web of connections looked alive, breathing, expanding. Every pulse was a transaction, every transaction, a crime. A voice cut through the hum of machines. Dark market just processed another 50 Bitcoin. Vendor tagged Black Nova. Same pattern as last week. For years, law enforcement had been watching from the outside, unable to pierce the walls of encryption that hid Hydra and its clones. But this time was different. Somewhere inside the empire, someone was leaking. The leak began in the most mundane way possible. A misconfigured server in Ukraine. Investigators had traced an unrelated money laundering ring to a hosting provider in Kharkiv. But when they looked closer, they stumbled onto something bigger, an admin panel linked to Dark Market's backend. The login page was crude, the security outdated, a relic from earlier builds. Yet behind it lay chat logs, payment ledgers, even vendor messages written in Russian, German, and English. The name at the top of the logs caught their eye: the Mastermind. Over weeks, digital forensics experts from Germany, the US, and the Netherlands pooled resources. They traced Bitcoin wallets, cross-referenced timestamps, followed blockchain trails through tumblers and mixers that promised to erase all evidence. Each layer peeled back revealed another alias, another shadow, and then a pattern. A single IP address that had briefly connected to Dark Market servers without Tor. Once, by mistake, it belonged to a 3-4-year-old Australian man named Julian K. January 2021. A parking lot outside the German-Danish border. Julian K. sat inside a car, laptop open, tethered to a mobile hotspot. On the screen, admin controls for Dark Market. He was unaware that every keystroke was being mirrored by investigators watching from thousands of miles away. When the tactical team moved in, he barely had time to look up. The laptop was still connected when the handcuffs clicked shut. Inside were encryption keys, server addresses, and most importantly, the roadmap to the rest of the empire. Within days, operations began across continents. Data centers were raided in Germany, the Netherlands, Ukraine, and Moldova. Servers seized, Bitcoin wallets frozen. But this was just the surface web of a much deeper network. When word of the raids reached Hydra's operators, panic spread like wildfire through encrypted chat rooms. Shut everything down, new mirrors only. Compromised nodes wipe them. For the first time in its reign, Hydra's tone wasn't arrogant, it was afraid. The admins scrambled to relocate servers, rotate wallets, and silence insiders. But fear is noisy, and noise attracts attention. American agencies joined in: the DEA, FBI, IRS, CI, each following the crypto trails Hydra believed were untraceable. They built digital profiles, tracked vendor movements, and quietly infiltrated Hydra's user base through undercover accounts. The walls were closing in, but the empire had one last defense, and it wasn't technology. It was loyalty born of mutual destruction. Because in the dark web, everyone has secrets. And when an empire begins to fall, the question isn't who will get caught first. It's who will burn the evidence before they do. March 2021. A whisper rippled through Telegram channels and darknet forums. Hydra's admins are compromised. At first, few believed it. Hydra had survived countless takedowns, faked shutdowns, and coordinated DDoS wars. Its reputation was mythic, the one market law enforcement could never touch. But myths die the same way everything else does, from the inside out. The first sign came from a user named Obsidian, a mid-tier vendor specializing in counterfeit euros. His drop points in Moscow suddenly stopped responding. His messages to Hydra's support staff vanished unanswered. Then his Bitcoin wallet linked to a Hydra escrow system was frozen. Within hours, the panic spread. Vendors couldn't withdraw funds. Buyers couldn't confirm transactions. Support tickets piled into silence. On the darknet, silence is worse than noise. It means someone is pulling wires behind the curtain. Behind closed doors, law enforcement teams in Germany and the United States had already connected the dots. Julian K's seized laptop had led them to fragments of Hydra's internal routing keys, cryptographic fingerprints pointing to servers deep inside Russia. Accessing them, would require cooperation few thought possible. But the global game had changed. In late 2021, Europol, the FBI, and the German Federal Criminal Police, BKA, formed a coalition under a code name that never reached the press: Operation Joint Domain. Its goal wasn't to arrest low-level dealers. It was to dismantle the infrastructure to make Hydra vanish not just physically, but digitally. The operation's strategy was elegant in its brutality. 1. Infiltrate Hydra's administrative channels using fake vendor credentials. 2. Map every server handshake and mirrored node. 3. Trigger synchronized seizures across multiple jurisdictions before Hydra could wipe its backups. Timing was everything. A single delay, a wrong clock, a leaky informant, and the network would scatter again. At 3:42 a.m. GMT, the 5th of April, 2022, command went live. Across Germany, data centers went dark. Racks of servers that had quietly funneled billions in Bitcoin flickered out like extinguished stars. In Frankfurt, a Hydra admin known as Ura tried to purge one final cache. The deletion command never executed. A Europol mirror had already taken over root control. By sunrise, it was over. Hydra, the most powerful dark web market in history, was gone. Its front page now bore the BKA seal. This platform has been seized by law enforcement authorities. Hundreds of millions in cryptocurrency were confiscated. Tens of thousands of vendors were left stranded, identities compromised, reputations annihilated. But something strange happened in the aftermath. The dark web didn't celebrate or mourn. It went quiet, too quiet. For months, darknet forums turned into graveyards, threads locked, profiles deleted. Hydra's vendors, once kings of the digital underworld, scattered into smaller, fragmented markets. Some fled to Mega Market, others to Oh My God or Black Sprut, each promising to be the next Hydra. None matched its scale or discipline, but investigators knew better than to celebrate. Because Hydra wasn't just a website. It was a blueprint, a design that could be copied, improved, reborn. The technology was gone, but the idea, the belief that anonymity could buy impunity remained. And ideas don't die in raids, they wait. For the investigators, the raid was a triumph. Years of encrypted whispers finally silenced. But for those who lived inside Hydra's world, the fall of the empire didn't bring peace. It unleashed chaos. When Hydra vanished, it was as if a financial system had evaporated overnight. Thousands of Bitcoin wallets froze mid-transaction. Vendors lost fortunes locked inside escrow accounts, now controlled by law enforcement. Buyers panicked, unsure if they had been exposed. Even legitimate cryptocurrency exchanges felt the tremor. Bitcoin's value dipped as wallets connected to Hydra were flagged and blacklisted across the blockchain. In Moscow, whispers traveled through cafe corners and luxury offices. Criminal syndicates, once laundering their money through Hydra's sophisticated cash-out services, suddenly found themselves cornered. Their digital accountants were gone, their coins tainted. Hydra had moved an estimated $5 billion worth of cryptocurrency in its lifetime. To the surface world, that was shadow money. To the underground, it was oxygen. Now, oxygen was running out. Nature abhors a vacuum. So does the internet. Within weeks, Hydra's ashes gave birth to a new generation of darknet markets. Oh my God. Market, Black Sprut, and Mega Market appeared like mushrooms after rain, each claiming lineage, each promising to restore the lost order. But where Hydra had been an empire with hierarchy and rules, its successors were feudal, fragmented, unpredictable, and viciously competitive. Hacking attacks replaced diplomacy. DDoS storms, data leaks, blackmail. Without a single dominant power, the darknet splintered into tribal warfare. One leaked message from a vendor read, "Hydra was business. This is chaos." And in chaos, opportunists thrive. When law enforcement seized Hydra's servers, they didn't catch everyone. Hidden deep within encrypted backup channels were rogue administrators who vanished days before the raids, their identities still unknown. Experts believe they walked away with tens of millions in Bitcoin. And like digital ghosts, they began reappearing under new aliases, running laundering fronts disguised as DeFi startups, crypto mixers, or NFT platforms. The irony was brutal. The very technology once used to hunt Hydra blockchain analytics, Forensic tracing was now being manipulated by its survivors to build cleaner, smarter operations. Anonymity had evolved. It had learned from its own defeat. But the other side learned just as quickly. Following Hydra's fall, agencies across the world began coordinating in ways once thought impossible. Blockchain tracing tools became sharper. AI-driven pattern analysis began flagging suspicious wallet clusters before transactions even cleared. The darknet was no longer invisible. It was mapped, categorized, indexed. Yet, every map has edges. And beyond those edges, something darker was forming. By 2023, the landscape of cybercrime had changed entirely. The new generation didn't rely on centralized markets. They used decentralized protocols, peer-to-peer encryption, and AI-driven anonymity layers that could regenerate faster than any takedown operation. There was no single Hydra anymore. There were thousands of tiny heads, each growing where one had been cut off. Investigators now faced a nightmare Hydra itself could only dream of. A world where digital crime didn't live on websites, it lived in code, scattered across nodes, everywhere, and nowhere. As one Europol officer put it, "We didn't kill Hydra, we taught it how to survive without a body." The final twist came quietly. In 2024, a new platform surfaced under a familiar slogan, freedom through privacy. It wasn't on Tor. It wasn't even traceable through blockchain. It ran on AI-encrypted peer relays, disguised as ordinary web traffic. Investigators named it Chimera, after the mythic creature that couldn't be killed the same way twice. The code shared DNA with Hydra. Its admin signature, too, a ghost of a username thought to be erased. Hydra admin. So perhaps the empire didn't vanish. Perhaps it simply molted. Because in the dark web, destruction is just another form of evolution. And somewhere, under the hum of a server farm, another light begins to blink.